So today we are surrounded by the technology-driven business models. Technology, ironically, is both a cause of disruption and a remedy for it. Today's fast-paced, disruption-driven marketplace requires an increasing need for agility. Now, to harness, we, the digital and tech professionals, CIOs, CTOs, should be able to see around corners, make quick course corrections, and harness technology to reimagine business models and reinvent how to deliver value to our customers. What Netflix and Amazon Prime have done to buying DVDs, the same has been done by XaaS for enterprise IT. Today, XaaS has become a prominent model for acquiring and using enterprise IT. For an increasing number of applications, a lot of us no longer need to shoulder the risk and the cost of buying complex technologies and acquiring scarce expertise. Instead, we leverage expertise of world's biggest tech companies, likes of Google, Amazon, Salesforce, and savviest of the startups. Well, there are so many. XaaS is not just limited to software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service. Interestingly, today we have services covering most of the English alphabets. Well, don't believe me? Please Google it. You will come across right from A, authentication as a service, to B, BPM as a service, to C, containerization as a service, D, desktop as a service, and so on and so forth. For tech companies, product revenues are flattening and services revenues are experiencing unprecedented growth. And COVID-19 has only fueled this trend further. So what has made anything as a service model very popular? I mean, is flexible consumption model driving its uptake? Is it about cost reduction or something else? Does it really go beyond these obvious benefits and help build competitive advantage? To what extent this is becoming successful? What is its real potential to democratize innovation, if at all that's the case? Well, we have lots of such questions which our panel is eager to answer. So let's dive straight into this panel discussion. Let me welcome Gopi, who is Vice President at Reliance Industries Limited. Gopi, what has been your journey with XaaS model? Tell us some interesting snippets on how you went about it at Reliance and in your previous organizations. Over to you, Gopi.
Hey, Jinesh. Good evening, everyone. See, the XaaS model is actually the names keep modifying, everything as a service or anything as a service or SaaS model or anything, of course. Before already you clearly put a contest and made it clear that, PaaS, SaaS and everything. So the thing is, anything as a service is a brilliant idea, which is already started everywhere in a different forum. If you look at the manufacturing or if you look at the pharmaceutical or if you look at the media business or any other IT services in that case or financial institutions, and everything is started in that. So in our logic is, of course, you already mentioned two things only it's required. One is agile, like fast, how fast you can get it. Another one is, of course, there is a cost model is involved. Without cost, you cannot just do whatever you want. At the same time, how fast you can get. It is like, you want to go the distance between two different locations. You want to drive either by cycle or bus or car or flight, what do you want to do? So I think in our previous generations, when we walk, they used to say, okay, I'll spend some 2 hours by walk and I can save 50 rupees. Now people say, I'll give you 50 rupees, but give me 2 hours. I just want to reach that place now. So the mindset is completely changed now. So the business is also required everything yesterday, not today. So the only model is left out is I want to do, suddenly one analytical project today. If I want to size it and plan it and procure it and give for tender or, bid for everyone. And after that, if I procure, then set up, it's become a, career project now. Now it's not possible. So you have to do that. They'll say, okay, are you already they send a mail and I need it now. It's not yet ready. So this is the only model I can see that, which is the fast, reliable, agile, and cost.
Yep, very appropriately put in, Gopi. Gopi, let me ask you another question. So since you manage, a lot of verticals at Reliance, including BFSI to manufacturing to oil and gas to, government services. So from XaaS and tech perspective, given this services-driven model, what is common across these sectors and what is the differentiation?
See, the model is earlier everybody thought, IT, okay, I send something, IT just look at it. Now it's not like that. IT needs to know the business. It's important to understand what they need. Then we just need to enable it. So the IT, before, IT will say, okay, this project is you guys. It's not anymore. IT is part of the business and we just need to enable it. And no matter which business it is. But at the same time, if they are driven, I think it's each individual make a big difference. The same example, if you look at any big player like IBM, HP, or even Wipro, Infosys, anyone, if you go and ask customer feedback, one guy would say, this company is extraordinary, excellent company. The same company, if you ask other customers, say, no, don't go to that guy, very disaster. But the company process is the same, company is good. What make difference? Only the individual make a difference. The particular delivery head make a difference, or program manager, or the director, or who representing make a big difference. The end of the day, the user people, that only counts. That people only make a difference of the technology, difference of the process, and whatever the things happening. So I believe each business, for me, it's the same. It's about how much fast we can get, how much revenue we can make, or how much we can mitigate the risk. I believe in that system.
Certainly, Gopi. I think people are the core of any operating model. And as you rightly said, people, depending upon each sector, their preferences, their priorities and business model, we have to identify the best fit use cases and go with what works for them. I'll come back to you, Gopi. There are many more questions coming in your way. But for now, let me switch to Yash. Yash, you're currently heading the tech part for Zivame, and earlier you've had interesting roles with Mahindra and Yahoo. So welcome on board. Yes, your focus and a lot of it in your career has been fully digital business models, right? Where probably a lot of tech stacks may have been built in-house. So how XaaS has played role in your tech journey? What's been contribution of in-house tech stack versus XaaS acquired tech stack? So talk us through some of those interesting aspects in your context here.
Sure. So first of all, really glad to be on this panel, and thanks for having me here. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context about Zivame. So I am the Chief Technology Officer in Zivame, and Zivame is India's leading destination for women's intimate wear. And I think technology and innovation is a very key part of what we do at Zivame, right? And we are actually, as you mentioned, right, so we're on a high growth trajectory, and the stack has been predominantly in-house stack. And in fact, even when I look at when I look at my career, I think most of the companies I've worked with have been in-house stacks, to the extent that even like the data centers and all of that were actually owned and operated by the company themselves, right? So for me, it's been an incredible learning journey. I think probably when I recall, when I was in Yahoo at that time, there were not many data centers which could support like a Yahoo type scale, and then there was no option, but you had to actually set up your own data centers. And when you look at today, right, for example, there's a great example of Netflix, which is a huge company which completely runs on public cloud. So it's been a big change of I think there's a big evolution of anything as a service, and I think that's something which I'm also learning as a part of my career journey, right? So if I try to break up, so again in Zivame, I think as we want to move fast, so there we try to leverage whatever services etc. are available in order to achieve our business objectives, right? So when I'm trying to look at what are some of the things where we want to use services or use anything as a service. So I would kind of break them up into three parts. So there is one area which is called domain expertise. So for example, if you're trying to build a new product and you don't have a lot of experience into that area, you want to expand your customer experience and you don't have a lot of experience in that area, then you can actually use the service and get that experience and have a faster go to market, right? One is a pure, the other option is a pure faster go to market strategy, where you know that you have experience but maybe you don't have bandwidth. And we are living in this world in these few years where augmenting and hiring is becoming increasingly challenging. So that's another approach. And the third more interesting one is also this. So while this use cases, while you may have bandwidth on your side and you may have time, but it still makes sense to go with a service model, is because there is also a network effect that comes into place. So for instance, if you're trying to, for example, if you're trying to build a fraud detection system, in that thing, all the data that you would have would predominantly be only data for your own company. But if you use like a service model, then other companies are also using that particular service, and then you get the network effect. Right? So if someone's done a fraud in a company A, then you will automatically know that this person's a fraud, and when this person is coming to your organization trying to do a fraud on your system, then because of the network effect, you already know that, and you can effectively block it. So probably, so these three domains, and then based on that, we keep leveraging services.
Yep, that's really interesting, Yash. So would it be fair to assume that the overall percentage split between build versus buy is changing, evolving over the years? And where does that stand as of today, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think we're still predominantly majority build. But I think one of the interesting frameworks which I use to decide build versus buy is what is called as core competency. So if this is something which we feel is a core competency, then we actually do go ahead with the build of that process. And for things which we feel are not our core competency, we would actually go ahead and buy or use external services. And the other factors are, of course, speed to market, etc. So those come into it. But I think we're still predominantly an in-house platform. I think a lot of, if you kind of break it down, most of our core systems are in-house. But I think one of the examples which I gave, right? So where our infrastructure, so like Zivame is completely on public cloud. So that's one of our that's one of the core things. But I think that's something that's also that we're using a service. So things are changing, and I think rapidly more and more stronger and better services are available. So I think going forward, you will see a reduction in those in the percentage.
Great, Yash. I'll have lots of follow-up questions, but maybe in a while. Let me go to other panelists. So Sachin, I'll come to you. Welcome on board, Sachin. You bring in a very rich cross-industry experience, and that too on both tech providers such as Microsoft and also on the tech consumer sides with Havels and now with Usha International. So please share from your experience, what's your interface with anything as a service model, what's been working for you?
Thanks, Jinesh. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. And Jinesh, it makes me feel like, that statement makes me feel like, Sachin, you're too old, just time to retire, right? So thanks. It's been a very, very, very learning journey over gosh, a long time. So I wish I could look like Yash or other panelists in the other panelists in the panel. So let me step back. So my cloud journey started when we started to hear cloud, and people didn't know what cloud really meant. Then came cloud as a service. Then just snowballed. I was actually surprised that we have services as a service covering every alphabet. Didn't think of that. When you were saying that, I was wondering, what would Q be? Then I realized, oh, it's Q as a service, or anything could be that, right? So pretty interesting times. But from a time where we said, oh, everybody's talking about cloud, I wonder where it's going to rain today or tomorrow or whenever. What do we do? How do we migrate? What does that really mean? And I used to be in Microsoft services at that time. I used to run consulting business for India. So we used to say, what is going to happen to services, right? From that time on to now, it's been a journey, honestly. And so for us, cloud means, and when I say us, I mean organizations that I've worked with in the past and now. Like other panelists said, the expectation of the user over a period of years has changed, right? The product as we call it today versus how it was called 10 years ago was very different. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, in those times, when a product was called upon, people expected a Taj Mahal to be built, right? It has to be right. Everything should work. Every functionality should be there. And I always say, by the time Taj Mahal was built, Mumtaz already died, right? So a lot of times the requirements changed by the time the product got developed and so on and so forth. Two, as Gopi was saying today, when the expectation is we say you jump and you jump by the time we end the conversation on this call, right? And there's nothing wrong with it, right? People understand if there's errors, there are errors. In the past days, errors meant you didn't know what you were doing, right? So errors are okay. Coding errors, okay. If there's a wrong data, it's okay to say, sorry, we'll go back and look at it, right? So it's very agile model. Now, to support that agility, it can't wait 4 months. Now with this, God forbid, with the semiconductors the way they are, it might take up to 9 months or 8 months to get a server infrastructure or hardware. Not possible at all. So having a cloud in terms of provisioning, getting things started, being built on it, works perfectly, right? Yash said he looks at core competency to decide whether we build or buy. I look at it from a perspective of if something's available which can do 80% of what you're looking for, why bother building it, right? Just go get it and get started because time to market. Just a different perspective of looking at things. Obviously, core competency does make it critical. So in that case, a lot of stuff that you might be looking for is available out there, right? You can go get started using it. You could show it to people. I still remember old days when it used to take us 3 to 4 months before you can even show a prototype to somebody, right? So now you could go and look at the software and go show it to the business, tell us what you want. So we've come a long way. Everything as a service is great. We're glad it's here because it's supporting the times, and especially the times with COVID. Thankfully, it's there, and we were able to get things going. What I'd like to say is, when you're looking at something over long run, right? You might also have to look at the ROI. So we start literally everything today on cloud, and then just see how things mature, what they need to interact with, so on and so forth, right? Obviously, telecom is stabilized. You can considerably depend on at least the bandwidth part of it, if not the phones. So that is stabilized, and that's going to only improve as we move towards 5G. So a lot of that has helped, and it's there and it's beneficial and helps us be agile and get going fairly quickly and show the business results in terms of what Gopi said, enablement, right? So that's where it is. I don't think you can live without it today, honestly.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, Sachin. So, Sachin, since you've seen both sides of the tech, right, from support functions to enablement to today, driving the business, and especially when it comes to buying technologies, purchasing technologies, or building products, tech and digital departments have started playing a very different roles, right? A lot of business decisions also started kicking in. So how have you seen this evolutions, right? The role of IT from probably being a gatekeeper to now orchestrator to maybe evolving to something else. So what's your viewpoint on this?
So Jinesh, I came out of hotel industry into IT, right? So I used to run restaurants in my previous life. Now, when I moved into IT, I never ever thought that IT is a gatekeeper. And I always believed IT is an enabler. And when I used to say this in heydays, people used to laugh at me. Honestly, they laughed at me and said, "What are you talking about?" So for me, it was not such a change because I've always looked at IT to enable the business. And I always say IT has only two jobs to do, either help increase revenue or decrease cost. That's it. If you're doing anything else, you're not adding value to the business, you're enabling it, you're doing something wrong. So go figure it out. So that's where it is. I've seen the CIO, CDO role. So CIO role first, and then CIO being asked to be a CDO, then CIO and CDO working together, then CMO coming into that loop, then the chief data officer coming into place, and all that stuff, right? The bottom line is whoever you're working with, good, bad, or ugly, as long as you're working together to make sure that you're enabling business or adding value to the business, I think life would be easier. Today, if you're not adding value to the business, you need to go back to the drawing board. And that's the bottom line. And there was certain amount of expectation in this term that wasn't there in olden days. IT was considered to be back-end IT, and it was surprising at that time. We used to hear back-end IT, you do back-end job, and then it became front-end IT. And all of that is gone, right? As long as you're driving business, you'd get what you want. You'd have a seat on the table. You'd be part of the discussions. If you're not helping driving business, then God help you.
Absolutely. That's very nicely articulated, Sachin. So we'll continue this discussion, many more interesting things coming up, but Shobhana, now it's time. I'll not let you be quiet anymore. Would like to hear from you. How many alphabets are working for you in terms of anything as a service? What have you done, deployed, made successful? So talk us about your experience at Bombay Dyeing and maybe some of the earlier ones. Over to you, so.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very glad to be part of this very interesting forum. So yeah, last maybe 20 years, if I relook, just carrying on the conversations of the previous speakers. So I think initially we used to look at possibly the hardware as something which we could outsource or co-locate or things like that, right? But in the scenario that we are in today, almost everything we look at whether it is available as a service outside. Right. So maybe initially it was co-locate your hardware, whereas you own the entire softwares, you own their support, maintenance, etc., etc. Until now, we have reached a situation where almost everything is on cloud, and you can decide what you really want to maintain by yourself, what you want your partners to maintain for you, right? Which also gives you the leverage of focusing on the real business needs and business value adds that you and your team can actually do. So I think there's been a sea change. We started off with using possibly collaboration platforms as a service. We started off with that, right? From the collaboration platforms, we moved on to check, particularly since the infrastructure was already coming to an aging and it needed a change, right? So it was the right time to check whether it is whether we should go for a on-prem kind of a model which was earlier, or we should look at a cloud-based model. So there was a entire discussion and working, like Sachin ji also mentioned, in terms of ROI, what makes sense for us, right? Then came the benefits of cloud, which were very visible, particularly when it comes to agility and it comes to scalability, as well as the flexibility, which we could get on cloud would never be achievable if we had an on-prem. So almost maybe 2.5 years back, we started our cloud journey, and thankfully that saw us through the pandemic very well, because we were able to ensure that none of our business operations were affected because of the pandemic. So now we have most of our applications hosted, and it's basically the cloud first policy, which is now not questioned anymore. Earlier, possibly when we would go to the management asking for cloud approvals. There would be questions, there would be a lot of discussions and debates. I think that has ceased to happen now, right? Now when we go for approvals, it's possibly, we know that it has to be on the cloud, right? And that also gives us, like I said earlier, a lot of time to deal with, the real business problems, where we could, invest a lot of our times and energies on that. So I think that's been our journey in the last few years that I would like to see.
Thanks, Shobhana. That's very wonderful to know. And Shobhana, you raised quite a few important points around agility, scalability, flexibility. So the services model, anything as a service model, how would you look at on the dimensions of business agility versus operational efficiency? Or both are equally important for you?
Right. I think both are important, but obviously the operational efficiencies, particularly with regards to the front end operations, or if I could state specifically, maybe related to customer experiences, possibly I think that would get a much more priority, right? And when we look at SaaS type of models, I think the amount of agility or flexibility that we get with those type of models would be very tough to have, if we have a completely built kind of a software with us, because that would have its own cycle in terms of its if you remember the typical SDLC cycle that we all went through, right? It takes quite a bit of time to see that your processes and governances are there, whereas in these models that gives us a lot of flexibility, and I think that's where the business buy-in also comes in a little more easily.
Thanks, Shobhana. We'll circle back to you very soon. Gopi, let me come back to you. So given, XaaS is offering so many benefits, so many different stories we've heard, and it seems it is working in almost every context, right? Whether it is pure digital business model or tech and touch model or any other new age versus old age industries. So what is the recipe for success? What do you need in terms of ingredients to make anything as a service model work? I mean, the talent, the people was one aspect you spoke about, but tell us, what is the secret sauce?
Actually, I'll going to tell you one thing, which is a lot of people already know, but that is the only secret I learned from my previous bosses, and including like these Premji kind of big bosses. Okay, I think that is the only mantra. For example, in technology or any other thing, it will keep going to change. The new innovation keep going to change. But one thing is never going to change, or certain things will never change. Even after 100 years, it's going to be the same. That's one of the thing is do more with minimum. You are able to deliver 100 things using 50 people with 10 months. Next year, we're supposed to do with 40 people with 6 months. After that, it is going to keep reduced, but productivity is supposed to increase. And it is about the only mantra, do more with minimum. That is always going to be there. So how we can achieve that? We cannot have a bulky servers, bulky storage everywhere. And the company, we want to be lean. They want to go lean. And lean, it's all means. Either it's a resource or technologies or softwares or human resource, whatever it is, it's supposed to go lean day by day. It cannot just keep boosting up. So the visionary is very important, but visionary, if you really look at it, it will surprise. Even you take the history of 100 years before, Mahatma Gandhi wrote one book, Suraj or something. He wrote one book and he mentioned that very clearly. In future, maybe there is one button you may get a cloth, one button you may get a car, one button you may get a food, one button you may get a newspaper. He mentioned that. But I'm afraid that they will come and our value may go down. He mentioned that in his book, which is 100-year old. So the visionaries are there, and if you look at each company have their own visionary, and it will be a gift, if IT guy is also part of it, and IT team leader and CIO kind of people also have that visionary, who is part of the business visionaries, like a mission, whatever it is. So the fundamental thing is do more with minimum. So if X model or any other model going to support that, nothing.
Great insight, Gopi. I guess, yeah, being leaner helps in running faster, not just in life, but in enterprises as well. Thank you. So Yash, what's your recipe for success? What would you recommend? And SaaS as a services model, has it really helped the innovation aspect? You've been trying to innovate a lot through the tech, driving business through tech. So how much of this has helped in driving innovation?
Sorry. Yeah, again, I think I'll again go back to the 3 points that you talked about, right? So, and this also applies in innovation as well, right? So, for example, let's say you want to launch something that's new, right? So again, you have to look at these 3 things. One is domain expertise. Like, for example, a lot of times when you're trying to do innovation, maybe you want to, you're trying multiple things, right? So, and innovation is not you try one thing and then you succeed, right? It's always that you try multiple things and then one of them really becomes a blockbuster, right? So, so again, I think services can help a lot, because you may not have domain expertise in all the areas that you want to try out. So you may want to do small pilots where there's domain expertise, and then once you see, okay, there is some traction happening, then in the meanwhile you can build your own expertise and then build innovation on top of that. The other one, of course, is places where you need network effect. There again, SaaS models are really helpful, and even in innovation. There may also be a speed to market angle there, right? So while, for example, you may have the people to ideate and to do the things, but maybe you do not have resources to do the implementation at that point of time. Maybe people are already tied up with other critical projects. So you may want to maybe try out building this with an augmented technology team or with an augmented team. So I think even in innovation, I think there are many things which can actually be where SaaS models can actually help.
Well, that's very nice insight, Yash. Thanks for that. Sachin, let me come back to you. When you raised a very important point around ROI, and eventually for any buying versus building decision, ROI kicks in. And this is where, while I have few questions, but I'll kick in, questions from audience as well. Mr. Suresh has asked, what items were part of ROI while adopting cloud? So how do you make this ROI decisions?
Good question. I think you have to look at, I'll tell you what is a wrong way to look at ROI, right? Wrong way in this case, especially when you're looking at cloud, is to look at servers, look at the cost of buying the server versus cost of having the server in the cloud, right? You have to remember, and as a result, we forget a lot of things, right? When you look at a cloud infrastructure, unless it's a platform as a service, if it is infrastructure as a service, you need to also account for the security aspects of it. So application firewall, a firewall, load balancer, all that kind of stuff that already might be there in the data center, which has already been implemented. So one, even if it is a colo or otherwise, right? People always tend to forget the increased amount of bandwidth you would need if it is an internal application to connect, right? And if it is growing of infrastructure internally, then on this side, you would have to add the number of additional people or consultants that you might need to get, if you might need to get that scaled up support system, if that into account. So as long as you're keeping these aspects into your calculation, you would be on an actual calculation, and you'll be able to take an accurate ROI, right? That's my point in ROI. Just be careful on that you're balancing both sides, you're including both the things into it, and as long as you're looking at all of that, you would have an accurate results, and you'll be able to then educatively take a call whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. Obviously, we've all said in short term it does make sense, because you can't even get the appropriate hardware in time. So and you need to continue to support or enable the business. So that said, when you're looking at long term, please do look at those and on both the sides, and you'll get an accurate ROI.
Right. And Sachin, thanks for raising upon this point. In fact, I have a follow-up question, because, the short-term versus the long-term question, a lot of people, there is another school of thought which feels that, while short-term it is certainly beneficial, but in the long run, they haven't really capitalized on the advantages, cost advantages. So how do you look at this puzzle, right? CAPEX model versus OPEX model, and in the long run, probably not, having much of difference in terms of the cost aspect. While there are other interesting perspectives you throw to the ROI, but what is your take on the long run part of this?
So I think, Jinesh, I always take it away from a CapEx versus OpEx discussion, right? Because that's not my discussion. That discussion lies with CFO and CEO on the organization, where they're able to provide guidance depending on the organization. In certain organizations, CapEx is good. In certain organizations, OpEx is good. And I'm not an expert on it, and I don't want to be ever one, right? So first point is, I always go and ask whether it's, if the organization tilts one way or the other. And if not, then you purely look at an ROI over 5 years, right? But to me, a life of a server is 5 years. Essentially, it can be stretched, but reasonably 5 years, in which you then look at what would be the cost to bring it on board, and then a cost to look at OpEx. And obviously, you should go with your assumptions to CFO, because they always have another way of looking at things in terms of depreciation, this, that, and the other, which I refuse to understand, and I have no desire to understand that. So you go to them, look at, build a business case, and you see it. What I have seen, and this is my personal view, and I'm not trying to influence this. Last time I said this, I got into big trouble. So I'm not trying to influence anybody or anything. It is my personal view that when you look at an ROI in a cloud model over 5 years, it tends to be more expensive than on-prem, with everything else bought into the realm of things. Now, don't believe me, please do your homework, make sure you're accounting everything, and go from it. The way I have used cloud is I have always gone into cloud first, built up applications, make sure they're stable, make sure they're used. Once we get there, then you go to that decision and see whether it makes sense to pull it back in or just leave it where it is. Anything that is accessed by consumers, external customers, leave them on the cloud. That's what I do.
No, that's fantastic insight, Sachin, and it didn't really need a disclaimer. We trust completely your experience and the insights that you're delivering.
I'm telling you, Jinesh, I've been in trouble before, so that's why.
Thanks so much, Sachin. So, Shobhana, let me come to you again. While a lot of interesting and positive stories around the benefits, but there must be some concerns which are yet to be addressed.
Yes.
So what has been your concern? Is there anything that you still face from tech providers or from your org context, which is still bothering you on this model, services model?
Yeah, I think cloud is always an evolving journey. I mean, it doesn't end when you put your applications or infrastructure on the cloud. Your journey actually starts there and it doesn't end there, right? So it's a continuously evolving journey. Some of the challenges that I can mention, the first and foremost is on the roles and responsibilities. For example, if you have an infrastructure as a service and you have put in an application on that infrastructure, there is always a part of a operating system, a database, an application, and the hardware. And when there is an issue, there are 4 people who are, discussing amongst each other as to whose issue is it actually, right? And the CIO is going around in turns to all the 4 of them, finding out where the exact problem is and to get it resolved. So I think this roles and responsibilities need to be very clearly established whenever there is a cloud component that comes in. I'm sure it was there earlier also, but it is more prominent now because the infrastructure is hosted elsewhere, right? And you have very little control on your own on that infrastructure, right? So that is the first one that I can state. The second one, which I feel is in terms of the pricing, right? So a lot of the cloud pricing comes with hundreds of components, which not all of them are completely understandable at all times. Right. So I have had a lot of discussions with some of the cloud vendors on this as to, why do you complicate the pricing so much? Right. So it needs to be a little more transparent, I feel, in that area. Also, in terms of the prices going up and down, of course, there's a dollar value also that comes into picture, but, the dynamic changes in pricing also at times is something that, we need to understand when we are moving into cloud. Now, these are things that may or may not affect everybody, but I think in my experience, I have seen this. So these are the ones that I am, specifically stating. So yeah, pricing is one. The obvious thing is also on the continuous monitoring. Now, there are various cloud models, So for people who are really wanting to get into this, I would strongly suggest, that they should do it in phases so that they really understand what it means, right? So like I said, it doesn't stop by just moving the applications. You need to do a continuous monitoring, because when you do a continuous monitoring, you would get to know that there are different models in which you can actually stand to, optimize your cost, which you may not know when you immediately move to cloud. So these are things that I think you will learn on your journey to cloud, right? And that is the reason that it is better to do it in phases, because maybe there are learnings in phase 1 which you could use in phase 2, and then carry it on to phase 3 and so on. So yeah, so these are some of the challenges. And like Sachin ji also mentioned, one needs to take care of the network bandwidth, because that is something that I've seen a lot of us overlook, right? So if you have a cloud hosted on a public cloud, you need to understand how much of a data bandwidth that you're going to use from that cloud, because that is also going to get charged to you at some point, right? And none of us really have an idea how much of that data is going to be uploaded, downloaded from that cloud. And we tend to maybe ignore it, or not prioritize it when we are doing our estimation in terms of the cloud costs. So these are things to keep in mind when moving to cloud, or these are the challenges that I see in the current models that are operating.
Yeah, I think I would also echo a lot of what Shobhana said, right? I think like one of the things is that, especially when you're trying to debug like an issue, right? Now, because there's a separation of this is the application, and then there's an abstraction over the operating system and over like the disks, etc. It becomes more challenging to actually go about and debugging, and then you need to ensure that all the right people are there. And then for example, so when I compare to some of my previous stints, right, for example, where everything was on-prem, you could actually go down, your own team can actually go down and debug there. Whereas if you're on like a public cloud, etc., then you have to do a little bit of influencing, and you have to ensure that those people are there. So there's I think that adds to a little bit, that adds to more complexity. And I think the other thing which especially I think on the public cloud infrastructure as a service, I think with on-prem we were always on top to ensure that we were optimizing, and then things were working fine, right? And with cloud, sometimes scaling is very easy. So you just pay, just add a little bit more money, and things scale. For example, if I'm short of time, then I may say, okay, I need not go and look at this DB, optimize the DB. I can just, for now, I can just upgrade the DB and live with this issue for some more time. And this kind of reduces a little bit of the discipline. So I think this is one of the things you need to be careful about, to ensure that right discipline and rigor is there. But I think there've been times when you have too many things on your mind, and then you want to push this for a little bit, so you would just upgrade you would just add more firepower to your cloud, to that system, and then you pick it up later on, and then you optimize things later. So some of that discipline thing is also there.
Surely, yes. And I'm sure, as industry, as, the users of the tech, as well as, on the supply side, when tech providers become more mature, some of these concerns will get addressed over a period of time. A lot of good experimentation, a lot of benefits, but I'm sure, it's a matter of time before we address these concerns. Gopi, let me, come back towards the end of this session and, ask you to, predict the future, a typical job. What's been your prediction around, XaaS model? Do you think some of this is going to fail, or something will continue, or something very interesting coming up, which you have been able to foresee, given your work and experience?
When you look at the model, I think more or less Shobhana and Sachin, Yash already covered in that subject. The prediction, it can be anything, but the thing is it really going to meet whatever the customer requirement or our requirement is going to meet or not? Because it's maybe thousands of new innovation already there, but we are not using that. We are using one or two. The same thing is applicable. So whatever enhancing the productivity, enhancing the security, enhancing the, ensuring that risk getting mitigated, we are absolutely fine with that. But at the same time, we always prepare as an IT, prepare for the worst, right? So when the pandemic started, how we enable that work from home immediately for lakhs on lakhs of people. and arranging, not only laptop and enable, work from home seamlessly. So it is a good experience. At the same time, it is important to, like a Bill Gates' new book, get ready for the next pandemic kind of story. So I think it's better to be, instead of feeling sorry, better to be ready with the worst case scenario always. I think that's a learning, we are keep learning it, but at the same time, I think Shobhana mentioned very clearly that it's confusing, many line items, and at the same time, it is so many things are there. But if you look at it, okay, you purchased this, but you didn't purchase a security model, you didn't purchase other thing, you didn't purchase, monitoring and other thing. But at the same time, when disaster also happened in, I know the many companies, it's important to choose the right partner. I think that is the real prediction, because what is happening is many of the areas, the predictions, the vendors, sometimes they disappear. They shut down the companies, and sometimes they're putting in the same line. One of the vendor is 3389, the port is open, around 3,000 servers got hit, ransom and everything. The poor guy who managed better also got impacted. So it is important to analyze and get the right partner. And one more line item is more than your return of investment or whatever. We used to add that NPV, net present value. Sometimes your capex may be 20 crore, but OPEX may be 30 crore. But when you really calculate 5-year time, it may sound like no, capex is good. No, when you really do the NPV, the cash flow and everything, sometimes the 30 crores is cheaper than the 20 crore index. So it is important to go with the open-minded, of course. Psychologically, we bound with that, but it is important to have open mind. So then this cost model and right vendor, and keep upgrading our team, and collaborated with the 50%, keep bringing from our external people. So the resource also going on. So everything together, we can make a success. And always the mantra is do more with me.
Certainly, fairly useful, Gopi. Thanks so much. Sachin, we are short of time. So last 30 seconds, maybe any quick predictions from your side? How do we see the future of XaaS?
I think with the way things are, honestly, it's cloudy, but it's bright. So I think the future is bright as we move forward, because the way we are asked to do things in a quicker, faster turnaround way, SaaS is just a savior that we needed, right? As CIO. So I don't see anything but a bright future.
Excellent. Very aptly put, Sachin. And future is certainly bright, and we would certainly like to believe that and live with it and see where we reach in a few years. So one thing is very clear, XaaS model will continue to be an integral part of digital transformation. It is here to stay. As we heard from various panelists, it's helping business agility, innovation, operational efficiency, quick time to market, and so many other benefits. While there are few concerns, and I'm sure, as industry becomes more mature, tech providers will certainly give us more transparency in pricing, as Shobhana said, and will also help us understand our usage pattern better, maybe do a little bit of predictive work on that, so that, we can really focus on what will help us do value add. With that, let me thank my fellow panelists, everyone. I think it's been a very interesting session, and as a student of technology, I've got a lot to learn from you. Very interesting insights. So thanks so much for your time. Thank you, audience, for tuning in, and I'm sure you've had a great time. Back to you, Anisha. Thanks so much for hosting us today.
Thank you so much, Jinesh, for taking us through this discussion. Very interesting, how companies are adopting the XaaS model in their operations. And let's hope, it becomes more clear and fine-tuned for everyone to get the best out of this. Thank you all for joining us, Gopi, Yash, Sachin, Shobhana, and Jinesh. Thank you all for joining us today and sharing with us your insights on how the system works and how to make the best out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Until next time.
Thank you. It's been
Bye-bye.
a great time.
Thank you.
Bye.